to this painting guide for absolute beginners. The first thing you'll notice is that the miniature has been primed black. Now this is with Vallejo black primer. You can do this through an airbrush or paint it on, but the priming is a really important stage. The other thing you'll see is that the miniature is on a resin scenic base. This will just helps cut down some of the issues around basing and really helps the miniature pop. And I'm using this Citadel miniature holder to paint with. They are a bit expensive, but it is a good investment if you're going to paint lots of miniatures and don't want to keep your fingers on it. The first step that we do here is using Terminator Stone, which is a Citadel technical color, and just give the model a dry brush. So it doesn't matter if it's a bit heavy, but you want to get just a tiny bit of brush paint on your brush and just lightly drag it across the raised surfaces, as you can see. What this will do in this case is a couple of things. One, it'll give us some really subtle highlights when we go to paint our base colors over. And two, if you're old like me and your eyesight's not great, it really helps pick out the detail. The third thing that it does is some of the areas on the miniature we're going to leave black, and this helps create some contrast and some highlights. So as you can see, the model's been primed and dry brushed with Terminator Stone, and we are almost ready to begin putting on some color. So the first color I'm using here is green gray, which is a Vallejo model color. Now you can use any colors that you like. This is the beauty part about near future games, or that we don't necessarily need to be grounded in accurate uniform colors. Basically grab whatever colors you think look good. I went for some greens on this miniature to get some good contrasts, but as you can see, we're just using a little bit of paint on the tip of the brush and lightly dragging it across the areas, making sure that we're filling in the gaps like that. Now the other trick here is to work from the inside out. His overalls underneath all the armor and his other kit are the bottom layer of the miniature, so this is where we start. And as you can see, if I get a bit of paint on the armor plates or the webbing, doesn't matter because the next color is just going to go right over the top of it. So you want to take your time and make sure you're cutting in all the areas where the overalls are, getting his hoodie behind his knees, and check back over the miniature and make sure you haven't got any gaps there. Now, as I was saying, the color choices are up to you. You can do your research and make sure you're getting historically accurate colors and everything's spot on. But in this case, it's really just about making sure you've got two contrasting colors to get a really good effect on the miniature. So you could even leave that armor plating and the webbing black if you wanted, and that would look just as good, I think. It's really up to you. So here we go with the armor plates and the webbing, and really we've just gone with another contrasting green here. This is Vallejo model color German extra dark green. And the idea here is just to take your time and go over all the plates and the webbing and just make sure that we're really being careful not to get too much on the overalls. A little bit here and there doesn't matter, but it's all about taking your time, a little bit of paint on the end of the brush, and just being a little bit careful, especially around those narrow shoulder straps and things like that. The consistency of paint is really important. You don't want it too thick, so it needs a bit of effort to apply, but you also don't want it too runny. Then again, if you make a little mistake like that and get it on the overalls, it doesn't really matter. We're really just giving ourselves permission to have a go. And if we don't get it right the first time, the beauty part about this is we can just paint over it and fix our mistakes. So don't be afraid, I guess, is the big sort of bit of advice I'm giving you here. If you're not worried that you can't paint all the tiny detail, just take your time, a little bit of paint on the tip of your brush, and you're going to be fine. Use the dry brushed areas as a bit of a guide as to where you need to go. And really, again, don't be afraid, just have a go. Okay, this next step is an important step. We want to just color in the face. The paint I'm using here is Cadian Flesh Tone, and that's a Citadel paint. I think it's one of the best flesh paints out on the market, so it's worth investing in if you're going to do lots of humans. The idea here is to really just take your time and with the tip of your brush and paint that's a nice consistency that flows easily, you just want to make sure you're hitting all the detail there. And if you get some on his glove like I just did, don't stress. It's all good. That'll get painted over in a second. This step we want to apply a wash to the overalls and the armor plates. Now the wash I'm using is Athenian Camo Shade. It's just a green wash. Now you don't need to go out and buy this wash. You could just water down your dark green paint and maybe 20 parts water to 1 part paint, just so you can see it flows really easily. And the idea is we don't want to do any more than really put this wash over the miniature so it settles in the gaps. What this does is gives us some beautiful shading and allows the cloth texture on the miniature to really come out and look like cloth. This is a really easy and straightforward technique to add some depth to your model, and it doesn't require a lot of precision. It's really just take the paint, take the wash, splash it over the paint, and move it around if you see it pooling in areas. You don't want too dark. You still want that light green to contrast with the dark green. But if you do want it darker, you can do a couple of coats. If you want it lighter, you can water it down more. The idea here is that you really just want to create some shading and some texture on the model. Okay, while that wash is drying, you can then paint the boots and gloves. So the color I'm using here is Vallejo Model Color German Camo Pale Brown. But again, any sort of contrasting color will work just as fine. The idea is we want to just be careful and make sure that we're not getting up on the overalls, and just paint in the gloves and the boots. Choosing a color like this will contrast nicely with the greens and give you some points of difference in the model, so it really draws the eye all around the model rather than it just becoming a blob of green and black. Okay, once we've painted the boots and gloves, then we can make a start on the resin base. So this is just using London Grey, another Vallejo model color. Now the whole idea about this is again providing some contrast, and take your time and be neat. Definitely don't get too much of this on the boots. If you do, it's not a problem, you can just repaint, but the idea is we want to be neat and save ourselves that work. So once the boots and the base are dry, then we can just use another wash to highlight these colors. So the wash I'm using here is Agrax Earthshade, which is a citadel color. But again, you can just take your brown and water it down 20 parts water to 1 part paint, and you're going to get a similar sort of thing. But if you're using the washes a lot, investing in them is not a bad idea. You can pretty much slather this on all over the base and the brown areas. You can also apply a little bit to the face just to get some shading in there. And another thing you can do is use it to sort of create some darker shadows around the model where you think that they would be. For instance, underneath the hoodie, at the back, around the radio on the back of his pack, and around the straps on the legs there. So this is just, again, another way to put some texture and some shading on the model, and it's not too technically difficult. The final step, once all of that's dry, and absolutely wait until it's all dry, is to just give it another very light dry brush with Terminator Stone. Now you only want a tiny bit of this paint on your brush, so put it on and then dust it off on a tissue or the back of your hand until you're only seeing tiny little streaks come off. Once you've got that, very gently drag it across the model, and this will just pick up on the raised areas. And this will give you a really high contrast highlight, but only on the very edges of the raised areas. Now this is a real cheat to get some good detail on the miniatures, and D1Z miniatures are perfect for this, just for the absolute level of crispness in the molding. The final step you can see here, I'm just putting a little tuft of grass on the base, again using a yellowy green to contrast with the darker greens of the model and the grey of the concrete base. So that's pretty much it. All in all, that took me around about 25 minutes plus a little bit of drying time. Obviously sped up for the video and edited, but you can see, not too difficult. A couple of tricks: keep your paint thin, keep your strokes neat, just use the tip of the brush, and look at high contrast techniques like washes and dry brushing and your color selection. And it's really that simple to create tabletop ready miniatures in no time at all. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to jump on the conversation on the Facebook group, and we look forward to your painted miniatures all over social media. Thanks.